evening, everyone. Alright, guys, so welcome to this session that is brought to you by CAT by LPT. And what we are going to do is we are again going to take this sessions further. So, we are running this series which is known as 200 most challenging questions for CAT, and we are doing it for all the three sections. So, we are doing it for VRC, we are doing it for DILR, and we are also doing it for COT. Alright guys, so now since the CAT registration process has already started, so 1st of August it was supposed to begin and it was already started, and 13th September is the deadline that you have there. So there is a kind of anxiety building up, there is kind of panic building up in students regarding CAT, because I believe there are some students who have just started their preparation maybe 2 months back, because you go for a crash course or something, right? Some of you would have been preparing it for almost a year or so, and some of you would be reappearing CAT. Okay, so what I generally see is that when the application process starts, there are a lot of questions coming up in terms of what they need to do and what they need not to do. So one piece of advice that I would like to give to students is that when it comes down to your preparation for CAT in the next 4 months, right? So November 30 is when you have your paper, and this is of course 2nd of August at the calendar here. So what you have to do is that make sure that you are working across the three sections. Alright, so when it comes down to VARC students, it's all about how do you prepare. So whether you understand the paper pattern, so just make sure that you're familiar with the paper pattern there. Alright, second thing important is that you're working on all the areas. So when you talk about VARC section, it's all about RCs plus VA. So you have to understand what are the things that you have to do for your RC preparation, and what are the topics that you have for your VA preparation. Okay, then of course it's about handling each one of these, in the sense that how do you practice these questions. So whether you are doing reading comprehension or you are doing VA questions, whether it is para jumble or para summary or anything else for that matter. So now understand, the question is how do you go about solving these questions. So we have these series running for you, okay, and what we are going to do is we are going to start with some VA questions and some RC questions, and we will look into how an RC is solved, how a VA question is solved. So make sure that you are with me and you are practicing along with me. You can of course watch it afterwards as well, but the point is that you need to get your basics right. So I'm sure some of you would be building up on your fundamentals, some of you would have been working on your speed, some of you would be working on your comprehension, and so many other parts. So let's get started guys. Let's start with the passage. So we will start with an RC passage and then we will slowly move on to the VA questions. Now when it comes down to RC, again the CAT is known for its emphasis on a lot of inference based questions. So we are going to deal with inference based question, plus there would be a factual question as well. Plus we will deal with some VA questions, okay, so whether it is a para summary question, whether it is a sentence insertion question or something like that. Let's get started with this, see to this, okay. So you have a passage here, okay, start reading the passage, make sure that you are reading it, and when I discuss the passage along with you, make sure that you are answering the question so that you understand what is the logic of dealing with the question type here. On what parameters do you eliminate your choices, because there are a lot of students who really don't know how to eliminate the choices. Okay, so they might have read the passage, they would have had sense about it, what the passage is talking about, still they could not get their answers right. So if you are some of these students who are struggling with the same kind of problem, let's get started in terms of how do you deal with the question type. Alright guys, sorry for the interruption. There were some technical glitches that we were experiencing, the perennial technical glitches that come across, the domain. So guys, I'm sure you would have watched the previous half year. So I'm just hoping that you understand the fact that we are basically doing an RC. Okay, so we have a passage over here. Try to read this passage, try to understand, try to comprehend it. Then we will discuss the main idea. We will look into the tones of the RC here, and we'll also deal in terms of what are the main points that is being discussed. Then we will go to the questions, and with the questions we will try to understand how do you answer the questions, and most importantly how do you eliminate these choices. Alright, so let's get started. So here is the passage for you. Please start reading this one, and then we'll go to the next slides. Just try reading the passage and try to get the understanding of the passage here. Alright guys, so I believe you have read the slide here. Let's go to the next one. Here is the last paragraph of the passage. Yeah, so the final touches. Okay guys, so I believe you have read the passage, and see, when you read a particular RC passage, just make it sure that you are in a position that you are able to figure out the main idea. Okay, so all these RC passages, they definitely have some idea, bearing the exceptions of course. It's about how do you understand the main idea, how do you look at the subsidiary ideas that is presented to you, how do you pay attention to the tone as well, and plus what are the inferences that can be drawn from the passage, because this is something that will help you to answer the questions in a better manner. So let's talk about this passage here, and let's go back to the passage and see to this what the passage is discussing about. Let's start reading the passage here. Okay, so it says, see, what I'll be doing is we will be highlighting the main points of the passage, not the entire passage per se, but we will be looking into the main points of the passage that will help us to understand how this RC is being answered. Good evening guys, whoever is joining me now, welcome to the session. Let's get started. So this says, not everything looks lovelier the longer and closer its inspection, but Saturn does. Okay, so we are talking about the planet here, which is Saturn. It says, it is gorgeous through earthly telescopes, alright. However, now see guys, whenever you come across a transition word, I'm sure you would have dealt with in your classes that whenever you have a transition word, there is always an important information that is coming after that. So just pay attention to the transition word. It says, however, the 13 years of close observation provided by Cassini, an American spacecraft, showed the planet, so the planet refers to the Saturn, its moons and its remarkable rings of better and better, revealing finer structures, striking novelities and greater drama. So here the author is actually talking in a sense that the Saturn has a lot of depth to it. And when you talk about this close observation provided by American spacecraft, it shows what? It shows remarkable rings of better and better, revealing finer structures, striking novelities and greater drama. So of course the topic of discussion here is Saturn, and we are continuing with the same idea. Let's read further. It says, by and large, the big things in the solar system, planets and moons, are thought of as having been around since the beginning. Okay, so we are beginning with an idea about planets and moons. So what does it say? It says, by and large, the big things in the solar system, planets and moons, are thought of as having been around since the beginning. So this is what we are assuming here, that maybe this is true. Now, the suggestion that rings and moons are new is though. Again, we are noting down on this word, which is though. So it says, is though made even more interesting. So we are saying what? The suggestion that rings and moons are new is again made even more interesting by the fact that one of those moons, Enceladus, is widely considered the most promising site in the solar system on which to look for alien life. So we are talking about a specific moon here, and we are saying that this is the planet where to look for an alien life. If Enceladus is both young and bears life, that life must have come into being quickly. This is also believed to have been the case on Earth, where it true on Enceladus, that would encourage the idea that life evolves easily when conditions are right. So we are basically talking about Saturn here. We are talking about a certain idea that maybe the big things in the solar system have been thought of as having been around since the beginning. Okay, and then we are quoting some other details here. Let's read further. Now it says, one reason for thinking Saturn's rings are young. So again, the focus is Saturn here. We are talking about Saturn's rings here. Is that they are bright. The solar system is suffused with comet dust, and comet dust is dark, leaving Saturn's ring system, which Cassini has shown to be more than 90% water ice, out in such a mist is like leaving laundry hanging on a dying downward from a smokestack. It will get dirty. So we are talking about Saturn's rings here. Alright. Now it says the lighter the rings are, the faster this will happen. For the less mass they contain, the less celestial pollution they can absorb. So again, this is a scientific fact that is being given to you, and I'm sure you will be able to figure it out. How does you decipher this? Now it says they contain the less celestial pollution they can absorb before they start to discolor. Okay, so we are talking about discoloring of Saturn's rings here. Now, Jeff Cousy, a scientist at America's Space Agency NASA who helped run Cassini, told the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference in Houston that combining the mass estimates with Cassini measurements of the density of comet dust near Saturn suggests the rings are no older than the first dinosaurs. So, we are comparing a timeline here. So, we are comparing that the rings are no older than the first dinosaurs, nor younger than the last of them. That is, they are somewhere between 200 million to 70 million years old. So this is what we are trying to make an estimate of. Let's read further. That timing fits well with a theory. So we have a theory being mentioned. Guys, whenever you have a theory, when you have your study, when you have an experiment being mentioned, always pay attention to its findings. So it's very important to know what are the findings of a study, what are the findings of an experiment, because you may have a question on that. You will definitely have a question because that forms the essence of that experiment. Okay, so it says that timing fits well with a theory put forward in 2016 by Matija Cook of the SETI Institute in California and his colleagues. They suggest that around the same time as the rings came into being, an old set of moons orbiting Saturn destroyed themselves, and from their remains emerged not only the rings but also the planet's current suit of inner moon. So we are discussing a phenomena here and we are elaborating on that phenomena, and it says Rhea, Dione, Tethys, Enceladus and Mimas. So we are talking about Saturn's moons here, right, because we are discussing primarily about Saturn here and how the moons would have evolved out of this one. Let's read further. Now it says Dr. Cook and his colleagues used computer simulations of Saturn's moon's orbits as a sort of time machine. Okay, so they are using it as an instrument, looking at the rate at which tidal friction is causing these orbits to lengthen. They are extrapolated backwards to find out what those orbits would have looked like in the past. So we are talking about what these orbits would have looked like in the past. They discovered, now this is important guys, whenever you come across a text that tells you the findings of the study, findings of the experiment, findings of any process, just pay attention to what it has to say. So it says they discovered that about 100 million years ago, the orbits of two of them, Tethys and Dione, would have interacted in a way that left the planes in which they orbit markedly tilted. So this is one of the observations that they are making, that it should have been tilted. But again, you have a transition word, and whenever you have a transition word, make it a point that you have some important information coming your way. So it says what? But their orbits are untilted. Okay, so we were making a description in terms of what happens and how the moons or the orbits are tilted. Now it says what? Their orbits are untilted. So we're talking about the planets here. Now it says the obvious if unsettling conclusion was that. So we are again looking at the conclusion of the study that we started off with the discussion of the passage here. It says conclusion was that this interaction never happened. So all that process that we were referring to, all those what do you say, process that you were referring to, or the timeline that you were referring to, is actually not happening. So what is the unsettling conclusion? It says the obvious if unsettling conclusion was that this interaction never happened and does. So you are going to that fact further. It says that at the time when it should have happened, Dione and Tethys were simply not there. So we are figuring out whether these moons of the planet was there or not. So whether they are tilted, whether they are untilted, and it says what? They are simply not there. They must have come into being later. So they must have come into being later. So that is how the author is concluding the passage. And I feel that the passage was because it was scientific in nature, so it was easier to comprehend. But the most important point is, even if you are dealing with a science passage, the point comes down to how do you answer the questions. So comprehension would not be a major trouble in the science passage because most of the things are factual. But still, I have seen students, not many of them making some mistakes in terms of the answers that they are marking to these questions. So let us have a look at how do we go about the questions. So here is the first question. It says, data provided by Cassini challenge the assumption that. Okay, so we started off with the passages, we started off with the discussion of the RC in a certain format. Let's look at how do we answer this question. So let's go back to the passage. Right, so this is where the context comes. Okay, so now we were talking about Saturn here, that it is wonderful, it is lovelier and longer and closer its inspection. Then we talked about this observation by American spacecraft Cassini. Now it says what? However, the 13 years of close observation provided by Cassini and American spacecraft showed the planets, its moon and its remarkable rings of better. So they are becoming even better and better. Look at this line. It says by and large. By and large means on the whole. It says by and large, the big things in the solar system, planets and moons, are thought of as having been around since the beginning. So this is the thing that we are assuming. This is something we are starting with the conception of. Okay. Now, so this says that we are beginning with the point that big things in the solar system are, that is planets and moons, are thought of as having been around since the beginning. The suggestion that rings and moons are new is though made even more interesting by the fact that one of those moons. So we are talking about the moons of Saturn here. Let's go back to the passage because this is where the answer is going to come from. Let's look at the options here. Let's look at what the options has to say. So it says Saturn's ring system is composed mostly of water ice. Now if you look at this option here, there is no mention of water ice, and plus the context of the passage does not discuss this. So if you look at this option, Saturn's ring system is composed mostly of water ice, and even if we were reading it through the passage, we never figured it out that this is the assumption that we were looking into. So this will be cancelled out, safely cancelled out. Let's look at B. It says there was life on Earth when Saturn's rings were being formed. So again, is this the assumption that we are going to start with? Well, that's not the case because we were not focusing on life on Earth. We were simply saying that the Saturn and its moon actually were not there when the things started ringing. Alright, so there was life on Earth when Saturn's rings were being formed. Well, this is not the assumption that was made in the initial of the passages here. Okay, let's look at C and D. It says new celestial bodies can form from the destruction of the old celestial bodies, and D says all big things in the solar system have been around since the beginning. Now if you refer to that context that I was referring to, I'm sure you would have figured it out that you find something familiar here. So we discussed all big things in the solar system. We were discussing it in terms of the planets and the moons. Alright, so this again have been around since the beginning, and Cassini then at the end of the passage we said that it proved it wrong, that these moons were simply not there. Okay, so if you compare C and D, C does not find a mention the way we read the passage here. The answer would be D option. So that's how you are supposed to figure out where is the exact reference to your question. Guys, also please understand, when you are doing an RC, whether you are doing a factual question or you are doing an inference based question, it all comes down to where is the reference zone. So especially for inference based questions, you have to figure out, because the answers are not direct, the choices are not direct, and you really have to figure out through your understanding what exactly is the option that we are looking for. So if you followed what I was discussing in the last one minute or so, you would have figured out this is the closest that comes to our understanding, and that's the right answer. Let's go to the second question now. Right, so it says the main objective of the passage is to. Try having a look at the options here and try to make sense if you can figure out the answer. Alright guys, so I believe you would have found your answers by now, because typically when you talk about CAT, RCs and the questions of RC, you don't have more than 1 minute or 1.5 minutes to answer one question. So making it sure that you also keep track of time, in what time you are answering the question, and you also understand the fact that the entire RC passage has to be solved in approximately, let's say, 8 to 10 minutes max. Okay, so you don't breach that level. So let's look at this question. It says the main objective of the passage is to. Now, for those of you who have stayed with me since from the beginning till now, I'm sure you would have understood that the way we were discussing all those things here. Let's look at what these options were saying. So let's find something similar and try to make sense that we do have some pointers here to figure out. We do have some pointers here to figure out how do we deal with the answers here. So it says establish that Saturn's rings and inner moons have been around since the beginning of time. So was it really saying that we discussed this entire passage? So establish that Saturn's rings and inner moons have been around. We did the first question and we said that we challenged this assumption. So this was the assumption that was challenged by the spacecraft here. So it says what? It says Saturn's rings and inner moons have been around. This goes contrary to what the passage is discussing. So this is absolutely wrong or contradictory to the main message of the passage. So this will be easily cancelled out. Let's look at the second option now. It says demonstrate how the orbital patterns of Saturn's rings and moons change over time. We are not discussing the orbital patterns of Saturn's rings and moons. We are simply saying that big things like planets and moons have not been around since the very beginning, and in the entire passage we are talking about the fact that Saturn and its moons, especially the moons of course, they have come into being. It's a recent phenomena. So it says what? Again, because it says orbital patterns of Saturn's rings and moons change over time, well, that's not the focus of the passage here. So of course this would be cancelled out. Let's compare C and D and see to it which one forms the right answer. So it says highlight the beauty, finer structures and celestial drama. So we just had one line and that was over. So if you look at this option, this is absolutely wrong in terms of we are not discussing the beauty, the finer structures or the celestial drama of Saturn in the entire passage. That's not the main idea we are looking into, right? So that leaves us with option D, which says provide evidence that Saturn's rings and moons are recent creations. So the way we ended this passage, the way we figured it out that the orbits are not tilted. So we have figured out a conclusion here. So this conclusion leads us to the answer that it provides evidence that Saturn's rings and moons are recent creations. So this forms the right answer. I hope for those of you who are following me since the very beginning, you would have got your answers. Let's go to the third question now. Right, so it's a factual question, should be easy to answer. Guys, if you like the stream, if you find it worth your time, please like the stream and help us reach out to more number of people. Okay, so this was a factual question, and guys, it's a serendipity taking place when you encounter a factual question in CAT VARC. All right, so but you cannot rule out the possibility. Of course, you may have one or two factual questions, so just look out for those easy ones, which is low hanging fruits, that will help you to get easy marks. So this has a question. It says, based on information provided in the passage, we can infer that in addition to water ice, so we discussed about water ice here, Saturn's ring might also have small amounts of. Okay, so this is again a factual question, and if you have read the passage, you know where the information lies. I'm sure it will be easier for you to figure it out. So one thing is that let's go back to the passage and see to this. Alright, so let's look at this one. You have a reference point here. It says, one reason for thinking Saturn's rings are young is that they are bright. The solar system is suffused with comet dust. So you have comet dust coming in the picture, and comet dust is dark, leaving Saturn's ring system, which Cassini has shown to be more than 90% water ice, out in such a mist is like leaving. So this is where you get your reference from. So we did talk about the comet dust here. Let's look at the options here. So it says methane and rock particles. So one thing that we are definitely looking for in our answers is comet dust, because we have talked about that in the passage. So again, this is cancelled out. Methane does not find any mention. Rock particles can still be there because it is generic in nature. It says helium and methane, where no reference to helium and methane. Comet dust finds a reference here. Comet dust finds a reference here. Now you just have to, Harsh, this happens every day at 6 p.m. Alright, so if you really feel that this is worth your time, you are most welcome to attend these lectures at 6 daily. Alright, so now it says helium and comet dust, and it says rock particles and comet dust. The passage does not mention helium at all, so there is no reference to it, no inferences can be made from any information here. So of course this is not likely. Of course you do find a reference to the rock particles here. So rock particles and comet dust, this forms the right answer. Okay, so when you are dealing with a factual question, just look for the information where this information is given. Look at your options and try to answer the questions. Okay, so the third question is answered. Let's deal with the next question now. Okay, so here is a context-based question. So it says the phrase leaving laundry hanging on a line downwind from a smokestack is used to explain how the ring planets. Okay guys, so again you have to figure out where this line is mentioned and just read out that context where you can derive your answer from. So let's go back. Alright, so let's look at this context here, because we are looking in terms of where the lines are. So here you have a line which says, one reason for thinking Saturn's rings are young in that they are bright. The solar system is suffused with comet dust, and comet dust is dark, leaving Saturn's ring system, which Cassini has shown to be more than 90% water ice, out in such mist is like. So look at this. A mist is like leaving laundry hanging on a line downward from a smokestack. It will get dirty. The lighter the rings are, the faster this will happen, for the less mass they contain, the less celestial pollution they can absorb before they start to discolor. So we are basically talking about the process of discoloring of the moons. Okay, so this is what we are referring to. Let's look at what the options have to say. So let's look at what these options have to say. It says atmosphere absorbs comet dust. So are we discussing the atmosphere absorbing comet dust? That's not the pointer here. So this is cancelled out. Now it says rings discolor and darken over time. This is what we were actually referring to. So the entire process, how these orbits or the moons, they darken over time. So because you have this leaving laundry hanging on a line downward from a smokestack, refers to how these orbits absorb the comet dust. Fine, so this is the pointer here. So it says rings. So if you go back to the passage here, so let's just figure it out. It says what? They can absorb before they start to discolor. So we are basically discussing the discoloring process of the moons here. Ring system. Let's look at the what it has to say. So it says rings discolor and darken over time. Well, this is exactly what we were referring to. So I just hope you have found your answers here. So let's keep it aside. If we find something better than this, we go for that. If not, we will stick with this option. It says rings lose mass over time. We are not describing how the rings lose mass over time. So this is cancelled down. And it says moons create a gap between the rings. Well, this is not being referred to. It's all about how the moons discolor over time. So the best possible answer that you can choose is option number 2. Rings discolor and darken over time. Let's go to the next question now. Question number 5. Alright guys, so I think this was again a simple question to answer, because see, we were dealing with the factual RC here. So let's look at what references you have here. Let's go back to the passage. Now before you go back to the passage, I believe that it says based on information provided in the passage, we can conclude all of the following except. So on the basis of your understanding for the entire passage here, let's look at if you are able to answer the question. If not, we might have to go back to the passage here. It says Saturn's lighter rings discolor faster than rings with greater mass. So we were referring to this line. Let's go back to the line here. So yeah, so here is the reference point. This is the reference point here that we were discussing. So it says what? It will get dirty. The lighter the rings are, the faster this will happen. For the less mass they contain, the less celestial pollution they can absorb before they start to discolor. So here is where you get your reference from. So if you look at the option here, again, right, so this is concluded from the passage on the basis of that information that we had over there. So this will not be the answer choice. Let's look at B. It says Saturn's rings were created from the remains of older moons. So we are discussing the process where we said. So let's go back to the passage here and see to this. Right, so we were talking about these things here. So look at this description. So this was the description that I was referring to. It says they suggest that at around the same time as the ring came into being, an old set of moons orbiting Saturn destroyed themselves, and from their remains emerged not only the rings but also the planet's current suite of inner moons, Rhea, Dione, Tethys, and Enceladus and Mimas. So we were discussing that these were formed in the process. So this is the reference point. And if you go back to the options here, let's look at this one. So it says Saturn's rings were created from the remains of older moons. Even this finds out to be a true conclusion of the passage. Okay, so even this will not be the answer because we are looking for the except version. Let's compare C and D. It says none of Saturn's moons ever had suitable conditions for life to evolve, and Tethys and Dione are less than 100 million years old. For those of you who have read the passage very carefully, let's go back to the passage here and see to this. So look into this information here. So it says made even more interesting by the fact that one of those moons. So we are referring to one of those moons, and this refers to the moons of the Saturn here. It says Enceladus is widely considered the most promising site in the solar system on which to look for alien life. Enceladus both young and bears life that life must have come into being quickly, and so on. So we did find the hints that there was a moon of the Saturn that was responsible for having the signs of life here. Let's go back to the passage and look at the option. So it says none of Saturn's moons ever had suitable condition. Well, this is absolutely false. That makes like this going to be the answer. If you look at the next, which was Tethys and Dione are less than 100 million years old, you do find this reference in the passage here. Let's go back and see to this. So, right, so you have a reference point here where you are talking about they discovered that about 100 million years ago these orbits. So we were discussing the tiltness of the orbit, and in the end we concluded that these orbits are untilted and that Dione and Tethys were simply not there at the end of it all. So they are referring to this fact here. They are simply not there. They must have come into being later. Let's go back to the passage here. So it says Tethys and Dione are less than 100 million years old. Again, this was proven to be right. So this cannot be the answer. The best option that you can choose here is option number C. So this is how we are basically looking into the question types here, guys. And I believe that if you pay attention to an RC in the right way, you are able to figure out most of your answers. Is that clear, guys? Now, so see, the basic idea of having these sessions is just to make you understand how do you solve a particular question. So there were some technical glitches in the beginning of the session, so there was a loss of time, but sorry for that. But yes, what I'm trying to hint at is that if you do something every single day and you are consistent in your practice, so it's not about solving too many questions at one go. Just make it sure that you are solving 2-3 RCs daily, and when you do it through logic, you do it through structure, you do it through commitment. Alright, so if you look at the way we have solved this RC, the way we have eliminated the choices, the way we have figured out how it is supposed to be answered, that will enable you to feel some level of comfort in the sense that you would be able to figure out that this is how the RC is solved. Right? We could not do many VA questions, so we did this in the previous sessions. Please watch the previous sessions if you like the video and you feel that this is worth your time, right? And for those of you who are still looking for more options, keep watching, following this channel by CAT by LPT for more such videos. We are doing these series, these 200 most challenging questions for VARC, DILR and Quant every day at 6 p.m. in the evening. And I think that will help you to streamline your process of your dealing and especially preparing for all these 3 sections. For VARC, of course, we have done a lot of questions so far and we will continue to do that in future. Just make sure that you stay with us for all these sessions, and if you have got any doubt, please let us know. Alright guys, so we did 1 RC and that is all we are going to do this. Please watch the video, read the passage at your level, try to understand it, try to look at how do we have eliminated the options, how did the understanding take place, and most importantly, for your RC preparation, make sure you are in the process of developing your habit of finding out the main idea. So as you see with this passage as well, we figured out the main idea there, and then there were a lot of details coming in. There were some factual questions, then there were inference based questions, and most of these inference questions are answered on the basis of how your main idea develops. So I hope this would have helped you. This is all I have got for today. We'll continue with these sessions in the coming days as well. So any questions before we wind up, guys, for those of you who are still with me? Right, so yeah, sure. So the daily lecture time is 6 p.m. in the evening, and we have days here. So for some days we have BARC, for some we have DILR, and for some we have quant. So anything, yeah, so I hope I have answered your question, guys. That was all from my side. So keep watching, keep learning, and make sure you have a commitment towards CAT. You just have got 4 months down the line. Make sure you streamline your preparations. You are working hard enough and you are good to go. Thank you so much, guys. That was all from my side. Thank you.